We've been seeking together for some weeks now, even months, to have our vision sharpened in regards to what God really had in mind when He created this thing we call church. And we've seen that the foundation of everything we do and everything we are and everything we hope for in this community is mercy. The mercy of God, by the mercies of God. We've seen that we're to not be conformed to the world, but to be transformed. We've seen that God has given all of us, every single one of us who are a part of the body, He's given us gifts to serve the others so that everyone can grow together up towards the ideal of the maturity that is found in the life of Jesus Christ Himself. So we've seen all these things, but we come today to the 10th verse in Romans 12. It reads simply like this. I'm just going to read the first phrase there in that verse. Be devoted to one another in love. Be devoted to one another in brotherly love. I'm not so sure we know what to do with this. What do we imagine? What do we picture in our minds when we read such a verse? Be devoted to one another. Maybe you see a picture in your mind. This is one possible picture that comes up in mine of Byzantine household, another culture, another time, where there are people who simply spend the whole of their day waiting in front of their master, whether it's the head of the house or the woman of the house, of the great house, or whether it's even the children. They're waiting. They've been assigned, and they are there ready at any moment to respond to the request or even the slightest whim of the person that they have been put in the service of. It's a kind of devotion, isn't it? The servant in a great house, constantly at the door, ready in the wings, does nothing else all day long but listens for the summons of the person that they're serving. Again, I'm not so sure we know what to do with this. Be devoted, this idea of devotion to one another. Am I supposed to appear on your doorstep every morning asking, how can I help you today? Is that what Paul means here? Am I to be waiting in the wings of your life, calling you every hour? Steve's never very busy. I think Steve wouldn't mind if I called him every hour and said, Steve, is there anything I can do to help you? Or Aaron. I could call Aaron right during his shift. He works the evening shift. Aaron, can I help you? Every 10 minutes. Aaron, can I help you? Be devoted. Is that what this means? Wouldn't I become more of a nuisance than a help if I did something like that? But then devotion's a strong word, isn't it? It's a very strong word. It has the feel of a single-minded commitment. Single-minded. Nothing else distracting me, nothing else getting in the way. I've got one thing I'm focused on. Being devoted to you. Or you being devoted to one of the others in our one thing, single-minded commitment, a wholehearted, whole-souled engagement with something, better said, for something or someone. The word devotion is it's an I exist for this one thing kind of word. Now, we could understand this, I think, fairly easily if we were to speak about devotion to work or to some grand sense of life objective. Maybe you want to make some great scientific discovery or solve some problem, or we become devoted to different things in the work sphere. Or maybe your whole life goal is to get up Mount Everest. I don't know. But we can understand devotion in these contexts, can't we? There's examples all through our culture. I think of the sports people who are so dedicated to practice with one goal in mind, to gain absolute mastery of some skill of speed or the ability to jump high or whatever it is. We understand devotion in these contexts. But we're not quite so sure what to do when we start talking about devotion to other people. Be devoted to one another in love. We're not quite so sure how this actually works out. And I think it's possible that we don't know what to do with this because it is something from an alien culture. This idea of devotion to another, it is something from an alien culture. It's not our culture. And it's hard to understand another culture that you don't know, that is alien to you. It's hard to understand how it works and why it works and why people are doing the things they're doing. I remember some very painful experiences in Albania. One of them that was especially difficult for me is we had been there for a year, so we felt like we were starting to at least understand some things about how things worked in that society. But we needed to move from the house we'd been in to another house, and we had too many things to just load up and carry them in our arms, and we didn't have our own vehicle. So I needed to find someone who could help me move our things from one place to another. I needed to find someone with not a large truck, but at least a truck where we could put some tables and chairs in and the few things that we had purchased for our home there in Albania. But I didn't know how they went about doing that kind of thing in Albania. Now in the U.S. here, you probably just call it U-Haul and the price is set and you know how much you have to pay and everything's clear and it's no problem. You know exactly what to do. But in Albania, there's no yellow pages. And in a city of 200,000, but there's no yellow pages. There's no list of businesses that provide that kind of service. So you start asking friends. I knew that much. I just needed to ask some friends. And so I did okay finding someone who had a truck, who'd be willing to meet me at the house, get the things loaded up, and help me move them. But then the real difficult part, I wanted to decide with them how much I should pay them for doing that for me. And there was a lot of things I didn't know and understand about that particular cultural setting. I didn't know the proper way to figure out a fair price in that culture. And so I was kind of at sea, and I tried to bring it up. I said, well, how much do you want to be paid, given that you're helping me out in this way? You're providing this service for me. Oh, don't worry, Bertie. Don't worry. I thought, well, I am worried because I don't know how much you're going to want, and oh, don't worry. Don't worry. I didn't know the cues. I didn't even know what was considered a proper wage in that culture for the kind of thing that they were doing for me. I hadn't a clue. Is it fair to pay him $15, or, you know, the common laborers there in Albania that show up in a certain part of town to get day jobs, they make about 3,000 lek a day for a full day's work, and 3,000 lek. Let's see, a lek was $1.40 when we first went there. So, I'm sorry, 1,000 lek was $1.40. So they're not making a whole lot by our standards. So I didn't know how much should I pay this person. And I felt completely at sea because I didn't understand the culture. And what happened is they wouldn't tell me what they thought I should pay them. So I just had to take a stab in the dark. And I knew that as they drove away, they were saying one of two things. Oh, we sure took that foreigner for a ride. Look how much he paid us. He way overpaid us. And they were gloating and laughing with all their friends. Or they were driving away saying, what a tightwad. I didn't have a clue which side I was on. It was a terrible feeling. An alien culture. When something's not our culture, it's very difficult to even understand why the things are the way they are, what motivates, what is being pursued, what is being chosen. No, this idea of devotion to one another, it's not our culture. Our culture here in this world is self-centered, not other-centered. We live in a self-centered kind of world. In the modern conception, to be devoted to another would be considered a sign of slavery, of self-imposed slavery. It would be seen as an affront to individual rights. The thought that I should exist, listen carefully here, the thought that I should exist for another, not for myself, but for another, that I should exist for another, for the sake and the service of another, that my whole being should be for another and not for myself. In our culture today, that is considered as demeaning, as a kind of groveling, as a kind of throwing away my own life for who knows what reason. Well, you say, I'm not sure it's that bad. Aren't you painting things with a bit too dark a hue? I don't think it's that bad. We all believe in altruism. And you'll often hear nowadays in the broader culture, you've got to give back. Have you heard that phrase? You've got to give back. Someone will do something, or they'll make a donation, or they'll even go on some kind of trip to help others out, and they'll say, well, you've got to give back. But in our culture, what that means is, yeah, you've got to take a little bit of time off of your self-centered, self-pleasing pursuits and give something to someone else so that you can go back to your self-centered, self-pleasing pursuits and not feel so guilty in conscience. It's a self-centered culture. We're willing to take a little time out from the pursuit of personal fulfillment to do something for another, But even then, this can so easily be nothing more than another effort at personal fulfillment. No, we have a hard time understanding and relating to a pattern and to a culture that is not oriented around the service of the self. The culture we know is completely oriented around the service of the self. You start to see this. You know, the best way to start to become aware of the patterns of your own culture is to run into somebody else who doesn't share those patterns at all. And the moment you do that, you begin to say, well, wait a minute, I do things this way, but they don't do things like that at all. Here's a different pattern. Oh, I've never seen that pattern before. And so the way to really begin to understand how self-centered the culture here is here in this fallen world, is to run into someone who has been profoundly set free from this culture. And so you have this guy Paul, whose letter we're reading and studying right here. And Paul says things like, to live is Christ. To live is Christ. Where is the self in that? Where is the self-centeredness in that? Where is the preoccupation with self? It's not there. To live is Christ. Completely devoted. The whole of the life, every thought, every emotion, every passion, every purpose, to live is Christ. You can hardly find a stronger expression of devotion. Oh, but you say to me, you've switched categories on us. You were talking about devotion to one another, to a fellow human being. But now you're talking about devotion to God. Now that's a different story. We can understand the idea of devotion to God. But then wait a minute. Wait a minute. Is it possible to even say to live as Christ without in one and the same breath saying also to live is to be devoted to my brother? Is it possible to say to live as Christ without that also encompassing and taking in a devotion to my brother, to my sister? Can those things exist apart from each other? In reality, any claim to be devoted to God that does not, by that very devotion, lead to a devotion to my fellow man is a false claim of devotion to God. It is very easy to turn religion, to turn church-going, to turn religious activity into simply another way of serving the self. Save my skin. But Paul here is not in that orbit at all. He used to be. He used to be. But now something different has happened, and he knows that if you're truly devoted to God, you will be deeply devoted to the well-being and good of your fellow man. Be devoted to one another in love. Paul shows us here, right here in this passage. Look there at the section we've been working on. Be devoted to one another, he says, in brotherly love, verse 10. And then he gives us some other phrases. He kind of builds that up and rounds it out. Give preference to one another in honor, not lagging behind in diligence, fervent in spirit, Oh, but then look at the next phrase, serving the Lord. Serving the Lord. We'll look at this more in the weeks to come, next week. But you have this whole list of things that Paul lists out here. And I believe that all of them are in reference to this devotion to one another. But Paul cannot speak about the devotion of Christians to one another without bringing the Lord into the picture. He just can't do it. And so, as he's talking about these different ways that we are to committedly serve each other, he brings in the service of the Lord. Because to serve the Lord is to serve my brother, and to serve my brother is to serve the Lord. If you're truly devoted to God, you will be growing in your understanding of what it means to be devoted to one another. But then again, we have a hard time with this because it's not our culture. Now we have to be careful here. It would be easy to say to ourselves, oh, okay, I get it. You're saying I need to be devoted to my brother. I don't have this. I better get a hold of this. I've got to get a hold of this or I might get put on the outside. You know that parable about the sheep and the goats and the ones who didn't help the others. When it came right down to the end, they were out on their ear. They weren't part of the kingdom. It would be easy to respond to this like that and say, well, okay, let's see, what do I need to do? How can I get busy here? I need to find some project where I'm helping someone. And then we go to work on a self-help kind of project. We're going to focus on giving back. We're going to try to do at least one random act of kindness each day. We're going to try to take some time out from our own projects to think of someone else. And so we begin to work on it in this way. But I want to tell you that won't work. We're talking about a culture change here. It won't work. If we just operate by this kind of moralism, this kind of, well, I should be giving to other people, and the oughts and the shoulds of what I should be like, and we try to add that into our day somehow, the people on the receiving end up feeling like a project instead of a person. It's not really about them, it's about me, and I've got to do this to feel good about myself, or I've got to do this to get into the kingdom. I don't want to end up outside of the kingdom, and so, okay, I'll do this and that and the other, and the people on the receiving end end up feeling like a project. I was reading not too long ago, I don't remember how long ago, but because I read a lot, and I was reading somewhere, and it really impressed me, a gentleman who was involved in Christian work. He said, far too often, most of what we do as Christians is transactional. Here, I have something to help you. Thank you. Goodbye. And he said, that's not what people need. People need you to say, here, I want to be with you. I want to be your friend. I want to walk with you in your life as it is, with the troubles you face and the challenges and the burdens you bear. I want to be with you. You see the difference? It's not transactional. It's a personal devotion to the other. It's an engagement in friendship. It's treating the other as on the same level with you, with yourself. Engagement that's personal and ongoing and not just transactional, so that I can get done the things I think maybe I should do. So if it's not our culture, if human culture as it is actually very self-centered, how do we actually make this radical shift so that we become people who are no longer self-centered? no longer preoccupied with ourselves. No longer spending the majority of our time just thinking, how can I take care of myself? How can I get what I need? How can I be happy? Self, self, self. How do you make this shift? What do you do? How do we escape the culture of selfism and become natives to another culture, to heaven's culture? How does this happen? Well, the easy answer would be that you must be born again. And that would be a true answer, wouldn't it? You must be born again. You can move to another culture, and you can somewhat approximate that culture. You can actually go quite a ways down the road. I couldn't, but Kelly in Albania, they thought she was a native speaker. She got the accent down so well, she'll tell you that I'm lying, but she got the accent down so well that they said, they thought she was born there. But then there was other things that, your cover gets blown, and they realized, no, you weren't born here. Now, with me, I can't help but tell this little part of the story. With me, my accent was different than where we lived, but it was passable enough that one of my friends one day, I was talking to him at his little store, and another guy came up, and he stopped and he looked at the other guy and he said, "What village in the Tirana area is Bertie from?" And he pondered and pondered, and then finally we told him, "No, I'm a foreigner, and that's why I have an odd accent." So you can almost approximate a native culture with a great deal of effort, but there's always something that gives you away. So the only way to be truly native, to a culture is to be born into that culture that you seek to call your own. Well, how does this take place? If you want to become a native to this heavenly culture, where it's crystal clear the moment you read it what it means to be devoted to another in love, then pursue a vision of the Christ. Pursue a vision of the Christ. Spend long time, slow time, unpressured time, unhurried time, thinking of Him, looking at Him, reading about Him. And especially that last act of His act of going to the cross. Spend time there, trying to understand, trying to comprehend what moves Him to do this, what motivates Him to such an act. The quintessential act of being devoted to another in love is the cross of Jesus Christ. Pregnant with the very thing Paul is talking about here. Pregnant with heaven's culture, with heaven's way of being, the devotion to the other and not to the self. And so if you want to be born into that heavenly culture, spend time, slow time, long time, unhurried time in looking at Jesus Christ. Spend time looking at Him until the language of your souls sounds something like this. Depart from me, O Lord. Depart from me, O Lord. You want to spend time with Jesus until this just comes up in you from the depths of your being. Depart from me, O Lord, for I am a self-centered creature. Do you hear the echo of Peter in that? Depart from me, O Lord, for I am a sinful man. Depart from me, O Lord, for I am a self-centered creature. You spend enough time with Jesus looking intently at his life, at his spirit, at what motivates him, at what focuses every moment of his each day. You spend that time, and it's inevitable, given that we come from this other culture, this fallen, broken, worldly culture, it's inevitable that if you spend that kind of time, at some point you will find yourself crying out, Lord, I can't even be with you. I'm too self-centered. So spend time with him until this comes up in you. Oh, but that's not all. The other thing that you will say, and I guarantee you will say it if you have said this first thing. The other thing you will say is, Lord, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Unless you bless me. What does blessing mean in this context? Lord, put the culture of heaven in me. Teach me what it means. Not just teach me, but give me a new heart that knows instinctively how to love the other, how to be devoted to the others. Lord, I will not let you go unless you bless me. That spirit that is in you, Lord, I must have it or I die. No, not die in the sense of I must have it or I'll be lost. No, but die in the sense of if I can't be like you, Lord, I don't want to live anymore. Oh. This is what he brings to if we'll seek him, if we'll spend that time saying, Lord, I've got to see the vision of what you are like. Not my broken, self-centered culture that I live in, that I'm surrounded with, that I'm a part of. But Lord, give me a vision of you until I see the places that self-centeredness stains the whole of my being. And cry out, Lord, if I can't be changed, if I can't be like you, I don't want to live anymore. Look at him until this is the language of your soul. And you will know just how and what it looks like to be devoted to one another. It'll begin to come natural. It'll begin to flow up out of you. I can summarize everything I've been trying to say just quoting another line from Paul in 2 Corinthians chapter 3. I think it's verse 18. I didn't put the reference here, 17 or 18. It goes like this. But we all, with unveiled face, beholding as in a mirror the glory of the Lord, are being transformed into the same image from glory to glory, just as from the Lord, the Spirit.